Well, hello, my beautiful stars. Today we are continuing with the podcast series on organized religion. This is part 2 of episode 1, and part 2 will be broken down into an A, B, C, and D format at this stage. I might compile C and B into one. But let's have a look and start with today's recording. Get your coffee, get your tea, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Let us start. History has a curious habit. It remembers the winners, kings, commissions, monuments, victors write chronicles, empires preserve the stories that justifies their existence. The voice that disagrees are often forgotten. Sometimes intentionally, sometimes accidentally, sometimes simply because no one remained alive to copy their words. For centuries, historians understood much of early Christianity through the writings of bishops who defended what would become Orthodox Christianity. These leaders often described other Christian groups as dangerous, misguided, or heretical. Yet, hearing only one side of a conversation is never the same as hearing both. The Hammadi discovery changed that. For the first time in centuries, many of these forgotten communities were able to speak in their own voice, not through accusations of their opponents, but through their own prayers, their own reflections, their own understanding of the divine. One word appears again and again through these writings: Gnosis. Gnosis. Today we translate it simply as knowledge, but the translation barely scratches the surface. The Greeks had several words for knowing: knowledge gained through study, knowledge gained through skill, knowledge gained through observation. Gnosis is something different. It describes knowledge born from direct experience. Imagine trying to explain music to somebody who has never heard sound, or love to somebody who has never loved. There are experiences that cannot be fully explained. They can only be lived. For many of these early Christian communities, knowing God was understood in this way. Not merely believing certain propositions, not simply memorizing sacred texts, but awakening to a living reality that transformed the individual from within. This distinction would become one of the defining differences between various streams of early Christianity. Some communities emphasized correct belief. Others emphasized transformative experience. Neither approach was entirely absent from the other, but the emphasis mattered, because emphasis shapes institutions, and institutions shape civilization. Perhaps the most famous text discovered in the Hammadi is the Gospel of Thomas. Unlike the familiar New Testament Gospels, Thomas contains very little narrative. No birth story, no crucifixion account, no resurrection narrative. Instead, it presents 114 sayings attributed to Jesus. Some resemble passages found in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Others are entirely unfamiliar. Whether these sayings preserve authentic memories of Jesus continues to be debated amongst scholars. What is not debated is that they reveal how one early Christian community understood his teachings. Again and again, the emphasis returns to inner transformation. The one saying reads, and I quote, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you." Another one declares, "The kingdom is inside you and it is outside you." For many readers, these words sound strangely familiar, not because they reject God, but because they invite the seeker inward. Rather than portraying the kingdom as merely a future destination, they suggest it begins with awakening. Whether one accepts these writings as sacred or not, their messages raises an important historical question. How diverse were the earliest followers of Jesus? The evidence increasingly suggests more diverse than many once imagined. Another remarkable discovery was the Gospel of Mary. Although incomplete, its surviving pages reveal something extraordinary. Mary Magdalene appears not simply as a follower, but as a trusted disciple entrusted with spiritual insight. After Jesus' departure, the disciples became fearful, uncertain, confused. It was Mary who comforts them. It is Mary who shares teachings she says were entrusted to her. Not everyone accepts her authority. Peter challenges her, questions whether such teachings could truly have been given to a woman. The text does not resolve the disagreement easily. Instead, it reveals something historians increasingly recognize. Leadership within early Christianity was not always understood in exactly the same way by every community. Different groups remembered different traditions. Different communities preserved different voices. Rather than diminishing Christianity, this diversity reminds us that its earliest centuries were alive with conversation. Conversation is really tidy, but it is often where wisdom grows. History has now spoken. Allow us to step for a moment into the language of archetypes. Whether one studies psychology, comparative mythology, or the tarot, certain symbols appear again and again across human civilization. Here we have the High Priestess, and she is one of them. She represents hidden wisdom, inner stillness, sacred mystery. She reminds us that not every truth announces itself with armies, crowns, or institutions. Some truths wait quietly, hidden beneath the desert surface, like the seeds beneath desert sands, like manuscripts sleeping inside a clay jar for 16 centuries. The High Priestess never forces belief. She simply invites reflection. She asks a question rather than demanding an answer. Perhaps that is why she has endured for centuries, because wisdom often begins not with certainty, but with curiosity. But history was changing. As Christianity spread across the Roman world, questions of spiritual insight will increasingly become questions of political unity. And when empires seek unity, they inevitably ask another question. Who decides what is true? The question will shape the next chapter of this journey. Now, let us move on to part B of this narrative. And let's see how it all ties in and how it actually continues. The Roman Empire stretches across the Mediterranean. Trade ships across the sea. Roads connect distant cities. Maps illuminate Jerusalem, Alexandria, Ephesus, Corinth, Rome. Each city slowly glows with candlelight. Small groups gather in homes. No grand cathedrals, no towering basilicas, just ordinary people sharing meals, reading letters, and praying together. When many people imagine the early church, they picture one united community carrying one identical message across the Roman world. History tells a more complex story. During Christianity's first 3 centuries, there was no single worldwide institution directing every congregation. Instead, there were communities scattered across the empire. Some met in homes, some in workshops, some gathered secretly during times of persecution. Communications between them were slow. Letters travelled for weeks or months. Ideas evolved, questions emerged, local traditions developed. What united these communities was their devotion to Jesus. What distinguished them was how they understood his life, his teachings, and his significance. To modern ears, this may sound surprising. Yet, diversity is often the hallmark of the movement, of new movements. Before institutions form, conversations flourishes. As Christianity spread, new writings appeared. Some communities treasured letters from the Apostle Paul. Others cherished collections of Jesus' sayings. Some preserved accounts that would later become the 4 canonical Gospels. Others read texts that are unfamiliar to most Christians today. This diversity presented an enormous challenge. How could believers distinguish authentic teachings from misunderstanding? How could churches separated by thousands of kilometers remain united? These were not merely academic questions. For many believers, they concerned salvation itself. Church leaders began responding. Among the most influential was Irenaeus of Lyons, writing in the late 2nd century. Irenaeus believed that preserving a shattered faith required clear boundaries. He argued that teachings passed publicly through the apostles and the church they founded provided the safest guide against error. From his perspective, unity protected the community. Without it, Christianity risked fragmenting into countless competing movements. However, whatever one agrees with this conclusion or not, his concerns reflected a general pastoral challenge. How does any growing movement preserve its identity while remaining open to new insight? That question has echoed through every single age. As debates intensified, language became stronger. Ideas once described as different increasingly became labeled false. Groups became identified as orthodox or heretical. Today, the word heresy often carries images of persecution. Originally, the Greek word Heresis simply meant a school of thought or a choice. Over time, however, this meaning changed. It came to describe teachings judged incompatible with the faith that church leaders sought to preserve. This shift marked an important turning point. Once a community defines itself, it must also define what it is not. Boundaries create identity, but boundaries also create outsiders. History demonstrates this pattern again and again. Religious institutions, political movements, nations, even families, every identity answers two questions: who belongs and who does not. Those questions can build healthy communities. They can also become the beginning of division. Organizations is not in itself a problem. Every community requires structure. Without leadership, little survives for long. The earliest churches appointed elders, deacons cared for the poor, bishops helped coordinate teachings across regions. These developments answered political needs. Widows required support. Disputes required mediation. Communities required guidance. History should not reduce these leaders to villains. Many sacrificed their lives during periods of Roman persecution. Many genuinely sought to preserve what they believed to be the authentic message of Christ. Yet, history also teaches another lesson. Every institution faces the same temptation. To protect itself, sometimes protecting the truth and protecting the institution became difficult to distinguish. That tension would shape centuries of religious history. Well, my friends, I hope you enjoyed this part 2, A and B. We will continue in the next episode with part 2C, where we will pick up with the tarot card, the Hierophant, and move through to the Emperor, etc. So if you truly enjoyed this, please like, share, comment, and do feel free to join this channel. I hope you enjoyed this second episode of the podcast of organized religion and how it caused division and also coherence and working together. Until I speak to you in the next episode, love and light all the way from New Zealand, Aotearoa, in the southern hemisphere of this beautiful planet of ours. Goodbye.